thank you so much, Laura, for chatting with me about this very, very important subject about book bans, which unfortunately you're having to go through. So, just wondering, like, can you tell us a bit about your experience of, potentially having your book banned? Is it Messy Roots? Is that correct?
Yes, it is for Messy Roots, which is my debut graphic memoir. I had heard about this about a week or so ago. Someone who is a part of the counter effort against this book ban, specifically against Samuel's Public Library in Front Royal, Virginia, had reached out to me via email and had told me that my book was one of the many other books with LGBTQ content that was being banned. And so they sent me a website that they had made talking about this whole effort with news articles. And I just read through the entire thing and was just so appalled to see this happen, because this is the very first time that I have, at least to my knowledge, heard about a book ban of, or like at least a book
All
challenge
right.
of Messy Roots. um, Given the state of the world today, and especially within the US, I kind of figured it would come sooner or later. But it was just really disheartening to like hear about this, and also read actually many of the different requests that people have actually filled out, and just seeing that they weren't even legitimate arguments. Most of the people who filled the form out just said that they hadn't even read the book, but just because they knew there was queer content, that was like reason enough for them to challenge it.
Oh, that's just appalling and so shocking. And and do you feel that is the underlying reasons for the book being banned? Is that this sort of anti-LGBTQ backlash that's happening?
Yes, I believe so. If just even looking through all the requests and coming from the mouths of the people actually banning them or wanting to ban them, they do call out the queer content. They say ridiculous things, saying that this is like indoctrinating children. It is led by the effort is led a lot by Moms for Liberty, which like we have known in other states and like other counties, has also tried to like ban a lot of LGBTQ content as well as like minority books. Um,
Mm.
I had talked to someone who like lived nearby that Front Royal, Virginia as well, and she mentioned that a lot of the efforts also coordinated by like the local church, and I think that has definitely a lot of tie-ins into like the anti-LGBTQ content.
God, yeah, that's horrific. And so, how do you actually respond to those who argue that like the banning of your book is justified, or either
Mhm.
for like moral or political reasons?
It's hard. It's hard because obviously I'm not there in Front Royal. I wish I could have a bunch of these people and like parents in a room just so we can have a civil discussion about it, and I can ask them what specifically really offends them in the book. Because the thing is, like, they are not only I understand that like it might go against their religious beliefs, and that's something that I personally have had to deal with my own religious parents
Mm.
and my identity, right? Like I've had these many conversations before. But even beyond that, it's not just a challenge to religious beliefs, but they want to pull it from the library. So they want to pull it from any child, whether or not they believe in the same religious beliefs, any child, whether or not they are straight or queer or whatever. And so I think that is where like we need to put our foot down. Of, you can have your beliefs, but for you to take that away from all other children is not okay.
Yeah, shocking, just utterly shocking. And I'm like, I'm like, I know what this answer may be, but I'd like to just hear your response, which is, do you believe that censorship is ever an appropriate response to sort of controversial or challenging ideas in literature?
No, I don't think censorship, that's the thing about like living in this country with the First Amendment, is like I don't think censorship ever is the solution to any news getting put down. Um I think people definitely have a right to critique things that they don't believe in. But to completely censor it is to take away that discourse that people need to hear about. So especially with these books, and even things in history that are ugly, like Nazis or racism, and like
Yeah.
really awful things that have happened. I've heard of schools are like, hey, what if we just like sort of like erase that so that people don't have to learn about it, or like, it is a very ugly part of history, but by not addressing it, learning about it, you are just accepting, you're not accepting the blame that like has been taken from it, and like the learnings that you can get from it.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that definitely heard that from one of the parents who's, I think, where a librarian was fired
Mm.
for refusing to take books down, and that was definitely his argument as like, how is this any different to then? And so, how do you think your book contributes to important conversations about like social issues, especially within the community? And what do you hope your readers can take away from your book as well?
Hmm. Yeah, Messy Roots was truly just a work straight from my heart because it is a memoir. It came out of the pandemic after a lot of anti-Asian racism that was happening both here in the U.S. and where I was living in San Francisco, but against a deep part of my heart, which is my hometown, Wuhan, and where
Mm,
most of my family is. So the book
mm,
first came out as like a reaction against that anti-Asian racism, and that kind of stuff is still happening today. So I do
mm,
hope it continues to inspire other Asian Americans out there, and also like
mm,
non-Asian Americans, to really speak out about these atrocities. The queer part came about because as I was writing my memoir, I realized that it is impossible to sever that part of myself. Like, anyone who writes a memoir, no matter what kind of topic it's about, it's impossible to separate the quintessential essence of love from
mm,
someone's life, because that is what gives us life. And
mm,
so, um, even though the kind of coming out chapter of my book is only really just one chapter out of many, um, I have heard from many readers, both youth and adults, that have said that that chapter really changed their life, either because
mm,
it helped them come out, or at least helped them understand their queer child, or like help them understand how to talk to maybe a non-accepting parent, or even those who are not queer. It helps them understand what others are going through, and that is all I can wish for Messy Roots, is to spread love and awareness and acceptance.
That's beautiful, and it's so sad that that message is being sort of, changed and for different agendas. And I actually wanted to ask, which is, how do you think the current sort of political and social climate in the US kind of affects the prevalence of book
Mhm.
banning and censorship more broadly now?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it is really scary right now to be queer, to be trans, to be a person of color. I think especially after the last president, it seems like the radicalization of certain groups have gotten more and more forefront. I see a lot with my home state, Texas, which has passed some really, really questionable laws against like queer and trans folks over the past few years. And I heard even just recently that they're wanting to pass a law that requires all publishers to label their books on whether or not they're like sex appropriate or appropriate for kids. And the very, very like slippery slope with that is that, like, when will that start to get used for book banning, because they
Yeah.
just deem any LGBTQ content to be sexual in nature, right? So yeah, it is very scary to see all this happen, but I do hope that people can keep rallying, and keep like participating, especially in local governments, because a lot of the book bans are happening in just random small towns around the
Mm,
country, and in like local government is the best way to get involved. Getting on those school boards. There's too
mm.
much Moms for Liberties running for school boards, so I feel like we need some other, like, I don't know, like World for Liberty or something, like going against that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've definitely seen, thankfully, a few people fight against it, including I think Penguin Random House, and also obviously Pen America are
Hmm.
fighting a case
Yeah.
in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. So it's good to see people standing up for free speech. And so
Hmm.
how do you respond to critics who argue that the work is potentially unsuitable for certain audiences? Because I yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's two ways. One is directly and one is indirectly. Um, the direct way is, if they are someone who, personally, I always recommend people to have that conversation if emotionally you're able to, ask them
Mm,
specifically, like, show me the pages that offend you so much. Show me the pages that you think are inappropriate and why.
mm,
And I feel like if they open up messy roots, like, sure, maybe they open up to the chapter where I come out, and maybe they open up to the page where I kiss a girl. But then you ask, like, why specifically, is that harmful? We see uh, people kissing each other in media all the time, and just keep asking and digging until you get to the root of it. And like sooner or later, if this person doesn't backtrack what they say, the root of it is just that they're homophobic, right? And so
mm,
I think like once you start to like really dig into why, it forces the person, the challenger, to really either backtrack the statement and or double down on the hatred that they have, towards a specific group of person. And either way, you'll get that answer. I think indirectly, um, not many of us can hold that conversation, or like not many of us
mm,
like are able to. So indirectly, like one thing that I've started doing is like the ALA as well as Pen America all
mm,
have forms that you can fill out, kind of calling out whenever some like a library school, is having a book challenge. So you can start reporting
mm.
those, and
Cool.
these organizations, thankfully, they have like the legal power to try to do something. You can reach out to book publishers of that book to let them be aware of it. And both my editor and my agent have been like super supportive and like giving me resources and letting me know what I can do. um yeah, and just like, I made a reel about this that like has since
Mm,
sort of gone viral, and I hope that many more people can just start posting it on social and like calling it out, because you never know like whose uncle or like whose neighbor is the person thinking about challenging. And I know plenty of
mm.
people in my hometown who've like wanted to challenge stuff like this. And so it's always worth getting the word out.
Yeah, and it's a perfect segue to my final question, which is so exactly for other authors going through, a similar situation, who, especially, for the smaller authors who just maybe don't know where to start, what is the best course of action in kind of challenging those book challenges, if you could
Mhm.
say?
Yeah, I think besides the resources I've already listed, and just like, getting your word out there and being as vocal as possible, I think one of the best ways that we as authors can really try to subvert this is just simply like creating more content,
Hmm.
creating
Mm.
more of that people want to take away. Sooner or later, if that becomes like the quote unquote mainstream content, they can't just like ban every book in the world, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like, I don't know, maybe this is like uh just a very like um funny or like spiteful way, but I always joke that for every book ban, I'm going to include like more, like one more gay scene in my next book.
Love it.
And my next book is definitely like just as queer and like just as like, I hope, empowering to as many young people out there as possible. So yeah, so I'm definitely taking this motivation to know that I'm at least on the right path to helping other queer folks out by angering these other folks.
Good stuff. That's really good to hear. Thank you so much for speaking with me, Laura. I really appreciate it. And for taking the time out just so quickly out of your day today. So really appreciate it. It's such an important topic, and I'm sorry you're going through this as well.
Thank you so much for the interview, Suswati. I think this is definitely really great, and I think I'm more upset on the kids' side than my own. As I say, I always take any opposition as like fire to my creativity. But I do hope that this gets resolved soon so that the kids can have their books back.